Hi, so in this video I'll show how to surface a vehicle with Smartify Nodes. So going from this to this, here with baked textures so that it can be exported and also render faster. So here we are in EV. And here we are in cycles. So the lights behave a bit differently in cycles. So the first thing we can do is adding an edge mask and a smart shader. We can resize the nodes. With Ctrl Shift I can preview the mask. So here I'm just gonna do a simple edge mask that I can bake to a texture, so it will be lighter and easier to play with, just like in Substance Painter where you bake this kind of mask. Here we can decide to have less edge wear in the ambient occlusion, so in the cracks, because we don't want to have scratches or edge wear in holes. We can increase the value. So once we are happy with the mask, we can create a texture that we will bake the mask onto. So we will want 4K. We don't need alpha. So in cycles, bake type emit without the selected to active. We can press bake once we select the object and select the texture. Here we see in our image editor or our baked edge mask. So basically, instead of this node, we can now use this texture. If we preview it, we just had to make sure that the model is UV mapped. Here I only have the half of the model and my UVs. So what I can do with this edge mask is adding the edge verify that's in mixers, that basically allows to mix a texture set with this edge mask. So here I can take one of the included texture sets. I could also create a new one in Photoshop or grab one from internet. With Alt right click I can quickly connect the texture set and then connect the edge verify to the smart shader. Now the edge verify is basically applying some edge wear effect to this texture set. So I can add a mapping utility, the light UV for example, to control the mapping of this texture set. For now the material is very simple, so I can work in EV. I can change the color of the edge wear. AO wear will add some ambient occlusion to the effect, so it's connected here to the smart shader, and here I can use this ambient occlusion that's affected by the edge wear effect. One of the first things I want to do is adding some noise to this edge wear. So in Smart Utilities I can add a noise library and a noisify. I'll drag the noisify onto the edge mask, and I will take one of the scratches to replace at least partially the noise texture. So my edge mask will have some scratches basically. So if I want to iterate faster I can switch back to cycles because the feedback is instantaneous, as opposed to EV that always needs to recompile any change in the shaders. So if I want to contrast further the mask, I can use a smart brightness and contrast that basically allows to change the brightness without washing out the data. It never goes to full black or full white. So I can decide if I want to have specular on the base texture or on the edge. So if I want, I can take another noise and mix it with the scratches. And I can also create a new texture to paint more or less edgeware. So with the overlay mix, I don't need it to be very high resolution, and I want it to be gray by default. And I just want to put a gamma so the gray is actually gray mathematically. So now if I paint this texture, it will boost or calm down the edge mask. We just need to paint textures in EV mode because cycles cannot reload an image on the go, that's the limitation, while EV can. So here I can go linear light with a small factor and basically paint in white where I want to have more edgeware and paint in black where I want to stop it. And then I can preview how it looks once it gets noisified. So one thing you shouldn't forget is to save your images, the baked ones and the painted ones, either to file, the image editor, file, save, or packing them so they are saved along the file. So here I can change any parameter after I've painted my override on top of the edge mask. Can decide how much of the painted edge is affecting the baked edge mask. So now one quick thing I can do with the smart shader is I add some automatic ambient occlusion. So there will be a bit more dirt in the cavities on the color. And so for a vehicle like this, one thing I want to do is adding some decals. So one practical thing with Blender is that I can use Photoshop, meaning if I create an image texture, I can paint it with Photoshop quite seamlessly. So here in 4K, black by default without alpha, I connect the color of the image to the factor of the mix shader. I can add a second mix shader with a white color to add some white decal images. So I can go here, for example, and in texture paint modes, in the tool settings, external, I can set 4K for the snapshot resolution, click quick edit, make sure I'm in EV mode, as it's always better to work on textures. In cycle, you can force a refresh, but in EV it will be refreshing the textures by default. So here on the new layer, I can simply add whatever I want, taking some inspiration maybe from pictures. Then I can delete the render, merge all the layers, Ctrl S, Alt Tab back in Blender, and click Apply. So here whatever I painted in Photoshop was projected onto this image that I'm gonna pack to make sure it's saved inside the file. And as this image is in 4K, I have enough resolution. And anything that wasn't projected, because the mesh was on an angle, I can simply paint in 3D directly. Using Ctrl, I can paint in black, my secondary color. And save the image. If I want, I can add some noise to this decal alpha. Now that the texture is baked, I can go back to cycles, and I'll just need the white points to be slightly gray, so it can be mixed with the noise. And I can add some brightness contrast. So here, if I want to color these decals, I can create a new texture again with the low resolution. By default, I can set it to white, and I simply connect it to this second shader. That's the shader that's making this decal appear. And switching back to EV, I can even disconnect the first shader to previs much faster what I do. I can simply paint in real time the color of these decals. I'm gonna add a bit of specular and glossiness to the decals and reduce the noise so they are more visible. Switching back to cycles, what I could do now is adding some vertex color to shift the actual diffuse color of the material. So I can simply add a color attribute node from Blender into the soft light of the first shader. Now on my mesh, I can create a new color attribute or rename the default one to color. Here I have already a few ones created. So if I look at the vertex color, it looks like this. So we can basically use this to soft light and multiply, if we want, the base color of the texture set. To pen the vertex color, you can use on the top bar the vertex selection, and then in select you can invert or select none, and with L in Blender you can select everything that's linked. So here all this mesh is masked, so whatever I paint will be only on this part of the ship. So here painting in white can brighten the wing or make it darker without affecting the other part of the mesh. So I can add these to my quick favorite, so pressing Q. I can have, swap color, select none, invert selection, or set vertex colors that will pen bucket basically the current color onto the selection. If I want to see even more precisely what I do, I can enter the smart shader. At the very right, I have the baking node. If I enter it, I can select the color and plug it in the surface. So basically, like in Substance Painter, I'm looking at the raw color without any shading. So that's practical to see exactly what's happening on the color. You can see the effect of the automatic ambient occlusion, for example, that makes the cavity a bit more dirty, and of the vertex color that, for example, makes this part darker here. And to go back, I can connect the green line, so the shader, to the surface output to see again the shading. If I want, I could mix a second texture set. So here I've created another one in Photoshop with some photo references, and I will simply blend the two together with a texture mixer that's in the mixers here, in node groups, D, mixers, texture mixer. It allows to input two texture sets and mix them either depending on a mask and their height map. So here I just want to use a mask. I'll use some vertex colors. So here I've painted another vertex color that basically blends the two texture sets for more diversity. So pressing Ctrl H, I can pack the node, hide anything that's not used. And now one thing I might want to do is adding some imperfections, some noise on the roughness of this textures blending. So if I look the roughness, it's quite homogeneous. With G, I can move the nodes around to reorganize them. And here I'm looking at the new roughness. So I can try different noises. I can go for something a bit stylized. And here I can see my reflections that are affected by this stylized noise. And then on top of this material, I can add some smart effects. So for example, the leaking effect or the paint effect, or even the dusty, the metallic edgeware could work, but I've already added a texture effect here with the edge verify. So adding the leaking effect, I can press Ctrl Shift, click, and look at the mask so I can see exactly how it looks. I can add a bit of only in ambient occlusion, so the leaks only appear in cracks, and increase the scale of the ambient occlusion, so we mostly have leaks in the crevices and not so much on the top. I have the location mask, meaning these leaks can happen only at some altitude, so with shift right click I can check the 3D cursor position. In Z here it's 3 meters, 5 meters, so I might want the leaks to start at 3 meters and to end at 5 meters. So here in the location, fade off 5 meters and fade in or fully on at 3 meters. So here I have a nice ramp. It's a bit strong, so I can reduce it. And if I want, I can add again some vertex color to control the leaks. Basically do a paint override here. I can select the leaks that I did previously, where basically everything is black, meaning it leaves the smart mask operate, but red zone will block the leaks and green will force them. But here I just want to erase some leaks in some spots. Now we can sort the color, maybe some rusty dark color. And the last thing we might want to do is adding some emissive. So here I'll use the extra shader effect in the smart shaders. So I can blend in some emissive. It could be glass or translucency or alpha. But here I will use again some vertex colors that I've painted here in white on the engines in the strength. So I can set the emission color to something nice, and I can set the value to 3, for example, so it will be actually emissive. And now what I might want to do is baking this to texture so it can be exported or play nicer with Eevee, just render faster. So if I enter any smart shader, the baking node, I can again connect the color to the output. So here I'm seeing the color, and if I simply bake this, I will have my color texture. So I'm gonna create a few image textures, 4K. I might want 3 of them, color, mask, normal, and maybe the height. So here I make sure I have my texture created. They are still blank. I can connect or select the color, connect the color to the surface, select the mesh, and simply click bake. I just want to be careful that all my smart shaders are the same. So here it's the 003. Ideally, it's always the basic one, smart shader. But here in my leaking effect, it was the 004, so I can just set it to 003. So I'm sure that the baking node is actually the same for all smart shaders. So here 004 could be the first one. So now when I connect the color, the leaks is actually showing the color as well. So I can select the mesh, select the image texture, I have my color connected, click bake, pack the image or save it, connect the mask. Here I want the Smartify convention, so metal, roughness, specular. I select the texture, click bake, save it or pack it. Same with normal, connect it, select it, bake, then save or pack. And the same for height, connect, select, bake. So now I can connect the shader again. I can copy these textures. Don't forget to save the file. I can paste them here, for example. Could be in a new material, but here I will be able to switch between non-baked and baked. And here I just want to bake the emission. I will enter the group and Control Shift on the emission, for example. I could also directly take the vertex color and bake it to an image if I want to export this emissive texture. But here, let's say I want to bake also this color. I can make this new file, select it, click bake, save the image. And now I can simply duplicate the smart shader. It could also be a normal BSDF, but here I'll connect the normal, the color. For the mask, I can simply go back to the bake node and copy this node, use baked textures. That will basically explode the mask back into metal, roughness, and specular that I can connect in a few clicks just with Alt right click and connect the height. And finally, I can connect the emission. And now I can switch between the non-baked material, that's a bit heavier, and the baked one, that's much lighter. And here within Blender, I could still adjust a few things. But basically, I've reproduced this first version. And here I can reactivate a few background elements and some shaders from the library. But basically I can also look at things in Eevee because as it's baked, it's very performant. And on the props, I've used the light materials. So here Metal 7 wear. So I have some edge wear that's very performant in Eevee that can play at 60 frames per second. And this more complex shader is actually baked to texture, so it's still totally performant in Eevee. So here is the first version, and the second version I just did a bit more quickly. So yeah, I had the mask color connected in the special. The special is for anisotropic and sheen. Here I've just baked the mask that's metal roughness specular. So if I want more glossiness, I can still remove a bit of roughness here in the smart material, and I can tweak as well the bump and the normal. So yeah, that's it for this tutorial on using Smartify a little bit like a Substance Painter on some hard surface model. Hope this helps. Thanks.